Tonight's shir is primarily based on the positive, uplifting, and inspiring messages and classes given by Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson. This week's Parsha, Parshas Ki Savo, tells us of a very interesting mitzvah that was given, and it was fulfilled during the times of the Beis HaMikdash. During the times of the Beis HaMikdash, primarily, Eretz Yisrael was an agricultural society. Most people were farmers. And there was a mitzvah in the different years of the Shemitah cycle to give different tzedakahs, different meisers. There was something called Truma, Meiser Rishon, Meiser Sheni, depending on the year that you were in the cycle of Shemitah, whether it was the first and second or third year, and then it would start all over again, 4, 5, and 6, and the seventh year was Shemitah year. On Pesach of the fourth year and of the seventh year, when the farmers would come to be Oila Regel, they had something called Meiser, Vidui Meiser. They would say a confession on the Meiser that they brought in the 3 years prior. And I'm going to read the language and the text of this Vidui that's called Vidui Meiser, but I'm going to read it in the English translation so that we can appreciate what it means more. It's in this week's Parsha. 3 psukim. And then you shall say before Hashem your God, I have removed the holy portion from my house, and I have also given it to the Levi, to the stranger, to the orphan, to the almana, according to your commandment, that you have commanded me. I have not transgressed your commandments, nor have I forgotten them. I did not eat any of it while I was in mourning, nor did I consume it while I was unclean. Neither did I use any of it for the dead. I obeyed you, Hashem, and I did according to everything that you commanded me to do. And therefore, the last pasuk says, so look down from your holy dwelling, from the Shemayim, and bless your people, Yisrael, on the ground that you've given us, and that you swore to our fathers, a land that's flowing with milk and honey. And this is what we call Vidui Meiser, the confession of Meiser. Very strange mitzvah, and a very strange nusach of this confession. Imagine a husband comes home from work one day and goes to the kitchen and tells his wife, Dear, I have a confession to make. And later on tonight, when the kids are sleeping and everything is quiet, I need to sit down with you, and I need to come clean. I need to tell you something that I need to confess. So the wife is all nervous the whole evening. What exactly is her husband going to tell her? They finally sit down on the couch when everything is quiet, and the husband looks at the wife, stares at her in the eye, and says, My dear wife, I want you to know that I am a perfect husband. Everything that you've ever asked me to do, I have done. I have done it perfectly. I have done it with the exact intentions that you wanted me to do. I am reliable. I am dependable. I don't push anything off. I am always present. I am always attentive to all your needs and wants. There is no one like me. I did everything 100%. And therefore, I ask you, please prepare for me an amazing feast for tomorrow, or fill in the blanks. That's exactly what this Vidui Meiser Vidui sounds like. We call it a confession. We call it an opportunity to do a house cleaning, to do an admission of wrongs. That's what Vidui means. Yet, when we see the nusach of this Vidui, it's anything but. It's an affirmation of my perfection and everything I did right. What is going on over here? So, the Sephorno asks this question, and he gives one answer. But I heard an amazing, profound, and seismic shift of perspective from Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson. Before we can go ahead and admit our wrongs, before we can go ahead and look within ourselves to better ourselves, to grow, to change, to shift from who we were to who we want to be, the first prerequisite is I need to know my strengths. I need to know my self-value. I need to know the things in my life that I'm doing right. To stop coming along and to start saying all the things I did wrong and all the things in my life which are broken and all the things which are not perfect and all the shortcomings that I have, that's not a vidui. The first thing we need to do is to have an accurate self-appraisal of the full me, the entire me, not just the negative, but just as importantly, the positive. And that's what Vidui Meiser comes to tell us. Of course, if we're going to grow and we're going to change and we're going to become different people, certainly we need to have our eyes wide open and we cannot be in denial. We're not here to be in La La Land. We need to know who we really are and be able to admit to difficult truths about ourselves that might be painful. But it needs to be done in a balanced way. It needs to be done in a realistic way that takes the full me, the full person into perspective, and to start off with a clear understanding and a deep appreciation of my values. And that's what the specific mitzvah of Vidui Meiser is coming to tell us. There's a pasuk in Shir Hashirim that says, Shechayra ani v'na'ava. I am black, but I am beautiful. I might be black. I might have, quote unquote, dirt, scuff marks, parts of me that I'm not proud of, parts of me that need to be fixed, parts of me that I want to transcend and transform and grow from. Certainly. But that's not the end of the story. V'na'ava. But I am beautiful. Because there's no such a thing as a person who is only shchayra ani, and that's his totality. V'na'ava. I am beautiful. But it's not enough just to know this intellectually. It's not enough to pay this lip service. Very interestingly, this mitzvah of Vidui Meiser was that the farmer had to articulate and verbalize this out loud. It wasn't just paying lip service. He had to stand up and say this out loud. These are the things I've done right, without mistake. These are the things I did perfectly. These are my strengths. These are my talents. These are my aptitudes. These are the things about me which are working well. We need to, that's the only way to fully absorb and appreciate and internalize my full value. We find very interesting, a fly will always be attracted to garbage. It's an amazing thing. There's no flies. You take out the garbage and you leave it outside. Within a couple of minutes, all of a sudden there's swarms of flies. We don't know where they came from beforehand, but they will always find garbage. Yet a bee is always attracted to honey. A bee is always attracted to that which is sweet. We had in Sukkot, which is coming up. When I grew up, we used to have these jars that we would put with apple juice or honey and hang it outside the sukkah because we knew all the bees are going to go there. Bees are attracted to sweetness. And there's this amazing, peculiar human tendency that in our natural state, we gravitate and zoom in and hyper-focus just on our own negativity, like a fly. We'll find, even when we do something right, even when we do something good, we'll find the but. We'll find why it wasn't perfect. We'll find that which is lacking, and we zoom in and hyper focus on that, and that's what becomes the entire story. As opposed to being like a bee, which is attracted to the sweetness. If we stop for a moment and we listen to the voices in our heads, if we will record the voices, the conversations that go on in our head, the negativity, the self-judgment, the buts, but you didn't do this, but you didn't do this, or yeah, I did this, but here's the reason why, so it doesn't really count. Or I'm bound to fail anyway, so therefore that which I'm doing now doesn't really count. If we would record it on a tape recorder and we would play it out loud for other people, we would be mortified. Not only that, if we would be a manager in a company and we would treat people who work for us the same way we treat ourselves, we would be fired. We are taskmasters. Negative, negative, negative. Without a vidoy meiser, without looking at the positivity. So why is that? Why is it that we have this tendency to only focus on the negative and we feel so uncomfortable focusing on the positive? Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into some reasons perhaps of why we do that and perhaps what we can do about it. So many of us only know the language of negativity. That's all we know. Unfortunately, there are people who grew up, that's all they've ever heard is what you didn't do right and what you still have to accomplish and what you did wrong. And the same way people need air and people need food and people need rest and shelter, people need positivity. It's a necessity, it's a human basic necessity. And children who grow up without that are devastated. And I know people, I have a friend who told me that he grew up, he doesn't remember once a positive word from his parents. So I found that hard to imagine growing up like that. But this person as an adult today is a broken person because the only language he has is a negative language. His self-image of himself is a loser, is somebody who's a mistake, and somebody that no matter what he does can never get it right, and he's not enough. And even if he does something right, he doesn't have the tools, he doesn't have the receptacles to be able to identify that this is something that's positive and this is something to be to celebrate. Many people have a negative narrative. We all have that little voice yapping in our brain. Many of us have a narrative that keeps on talking and filtering the whole world in a negative light. Because let's face it, we can always find something wrong with everything. With everything in the world, with everything in the people out there, and with everything with us. Even when we do good, we could always find something wrong because the truth is that nothing's perfect. Nothing is perfect. There's always more room for growth. But when we only have a language of negative talk, that's all that we see. That becomes the entire screen. Nothing else. Some people have this illogical fear that somehow if I stop just focusing on my negativity, if somehow I chas v'shalom acknowledge some positivity, I'm going to lose my edge. It's all going to fall apart. Like we're making a concession to terrorism. If somehow we admit that there might be a little bit of positivity in me or other people. But the way I stay on top of my game, and the way I will ensure that I will always grow and I will always transform and I will always steig is by being negative. Because if I chas v'shalom say something nice about myself or look at someone else in a positive way, it might get to my head. If it's going to get to my head, I'm going to get lazy and I'm going to stop growing. There is this belief that I don't know where it came from, that a lot of people have. I'm sorry? So I'd like to share with you a beautiful thought from a few weeks ago's Parsha. In Parshas Re'eh, the Torah lists animals that are kosher to eat and animals which are not kosher to eat. And it lists in the birds that are not kosher, one of them is called the Ra'ah bird. Ra'ah means to see, the ability to have keen eyesight. The Gemara says that this bird has such profound and such sharp eyesight that it could stand in Bavel and it could see a carcass, a nevela, in Eretz Yisrael, which is a distance of at least 500 miles. So you could wonder, why would such a bird be treif? That's a remarkable ability to be able to see so far away. So Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson says a beautiful idea. True, it has remarkable eyesight. But if you have such remarkable eyesight and you're standing in Bavel and the only thing you see in Eretz Yisrael is a nevela carcass, that's all you see, you're treif. Sure, the carcass is there. No one's saying we should be in denial. No one is saying that we should have our heads in the sand. But there's so much more to see in Eretz Yisrael. There's so much beauty. Look at all of it. That's what you zoom in. That's treif. That's not the way of growth. That's not the way of getting closer to Hashem. That's not the way of a growing and deep person. There's another reason that people feel uncomfortable with focusing on their positivity. They say, I don't want to be a Baal Gaiva. So that is false humility. Because what happens is we identify something negative, something broken, something not right with ourselves, and we hyper-focus on it, and we give it incredible amount of legitimacy and incredible amount of validation. The same way that this negative midah, pattern, tendency, desire, whatever it may be, the same way that this is legitimate, my good parts to me, my strengths, my positive tendencies, the things that I'm good at, that's just as legitimate. It's just as legitimate. Even if you don't want to say that it's more legitimate. At the very least, look at the whole picture. The same way I have something that's negative, I also have something that's positive. And we completely minimize and delegitimize all positivity. Baal Gaiva means that I am full of my own ego and I take full credit and I attribute my successes to myself. And I lack the humility of internalizing and having the attitude that they're gifts from Hashem. God gave them to me. And the same way He gave me my personality and my weaknesses and the things which I struggle with, He also gave me my strengths, my beauty, my milas, and the things which I should be proud of. And it's not ego to acknowledge the reality and the fact on the ground that I have strengths, that I have what to offer, that I do things, there are things that I do which are right. Imagine we go back to the guy who came home from work. And he comes home from work, and now it's his wife's turn to him. And his wife says, "My dear husband, I asked you to take care of these bills, and I see I just got an electric shut-off notice. I see you haven't taken care of it. What's wrong with you? Why can't you take care of it? Why can't you take care of the bills?" And you look at your wife and you say, "You're 100% right. I am not dependable. I never was dependable. I am somebody who you cannot depend on for all these things." That's passive aggressive. That's not a vidui. That's not a confession. That's not an admission of wrong. I'm just being passive aggressive. I'm basically saying that I can never do anything right. No matter what I do, it's never going to be good enough. I'm a shmata. I'm a mistake. I always was a mistake. There's no hope for me for ever changing. I don't even know why you ever imagined or why you have expectations of me that I could change. That's just who I am. Take it or leave it. That's not called admission. Somebody who makes themselves into a shmata, they are just hopeless. That is just hopelessness. That is false humility. That's not vidui. But then we have the third person. The third person who is full of his own ego, and he says, all this talk is very nice. Positive reinforcement, let's focus on the good, all this psychological, emotional stuff, it's very nice. But that's only for weaker people. People who don't have a backbone, they're a little bit more sensitive, those kinds of people. But I'm a strong guy, I'm a macho, I don't need to all these new age concepts. I don't need to rely on them. You can tell me the way it is. I can handle it. I have thick skin. I thrive on this stuff. And let's cut to the chase. There are people like that. So let's take this one step further. This idea that we have to start the vidui process with an acknowledgement of our true value and positivity. Let's go one step further. In 1848, in California, that's when the gold rush began. The gold rush was that there was someone in California in those times, and he discovered in the ground, he discovered nuggets of gold, and he found the gold mine, and the word got out, and people from all over the world, not just America, they came to strike it rich and to find their fortunes in California, which is full of gold. So there was a pioneer who lived in some little town, some frontier town out in the Midwest, and he was struggling his whole life. He had little mouths to feed. He never had much, and he read the papers, and he heard about the gold that was found in California in the West Coast. So he gathers his family. He says, "Look, we're struggling to feed our family. We're not making it. I'm going to pack up my bags. I'm going to travel out to California, and I'm going to try my luck, and hopefully fortune will smile on me. I'll make it rich, and then when I get rich, I'll come back and be able to live in comfort." So they say goodbye to him, and he travels for many weeks. He comes to California, and he comes to the area where all the people are gathering, and he sees that these respectable men are rolling up their pants, and they're walking into the rivers, and they take these tin plates, and they're putting in the water in the earth, and they're shaking it back and forth, and he couldn't understand what's going on over here. So he taps one guy on the shoulder. He says, "Sir, I heard that there's gold." So he says, "Yeah, I also heard that there's gold. That's why I came from some other city. I also left my family, and I'm here looking for gold." So this pioneer says, "So why is everyone sifting in these little tin plates?" Where is the big, shiny bars of gold? I heard that there's gold here. There's going to be big bars of shiny gold that I'm going to be able to bring home, and that will make me rich. What's everyone doing in the river over here, panning and shaking out the gravel? What's going on over here? So this man looks at the pioneer and says, I can tell you just arrived. You don't find big bars of shiny gold. That's not how it works. When you want to find gold, you have to sift through the earth. You have to sift through the gravel. And what we look for are tiny little golden flakes and little nuggets, little dust of gold amongst all the gravel and all the sediment and all the earth and dirt. If you find a few flecks, you know that there's more from where it came from. And you continue your search, and you'll find more flecks and more nuggets until you find where the deposits of gold are. And that's what everyone here is doing. The reason that before we can start looking at our negatives and we can start admitting to our wrongs and our brokenness and grow from them, the reason why we need to start with the positivity is not just because we need positive reinforcement, which is true, we do. It's not just because a person who's a shmata, a person who's completely zero self-confidence and is totally destroyed, cannot pick himself up and elevate himself. That's true. That's not the reason. There's a deeper reason. Because inside everybody, there's a gold mine. There's a gold mine of goodness. There's a gold mine of a desire to be closer to Hashem. There's a gold mine of people who want to, the quality of wanting to grow, wanting to become bigger than where I started off. But we have to find it. So we look for the gold. And the gold are going to be flakes of gold, and it's going to be amongst gravel and sediment and rocks and pebbles. We have to sift through it. But when we find it, and we find something good that we do, and we find a tendency that's positive, then we know I need to dig deeper from where this came from, because there's more here. There's more inside me. So yes, maybe there's a lot of gravel. Maybe there's a lot of negativity. Maybe my intentions weren't the best. Maybe I wasn't as consistent and I started this new Kabbalah for the 14th time. But where did that desire come from? Those flakes of gold, those little tiny nuggets. If we search them out and we don't get sidetracked and we don't get distracted and we don't get deflated by all of the gravel and all the sediment and all the other stuff around it, then we get to see where the gold mine is. And then on that we can build. On that we can grow, because I am starting from somewhere. I am starting from something that's inside of me. There is a person in Eretz Yisrael by the name of Rabbi Chaim Weintraub. And he is involved in an organization that does outreach, specifically outreach for boys who they came from a religious and frum background, and they've left Yiddishkeit, and they're struggling with different things. And they're on the outskirts, on the fringe of society. And this Rabbi Chaim Weintraub, he focuses on those boys. And he goes to gas stations, and he goes to other places, town centers, and other street corners where these boys hang around. And he spends time with them, he schmoozes with them, he gets to know them, and he develops a relationship with them. Rabbi Weintraub, he lives in Yerushalayim, and he had a 3-year-old boy. And shortly after his upsharing, one day, this boy was in his gan, his kindergarten, or his babysitter. And in the middle of playing, the 3-year-old boy tells his Mora that he doesn't feel so well. So the Mora takes him to the other room where there's some cots and told him to lay down. After a while, the boy wasn't coming out of the room. The Mora goes inside the room, and the boy had passed in his sleep. Terrible tragedy. And Rabbi Weintraub, with his family, they were sitting Shiva. They were sitting Shiva for their 3-year-old, pure, innocent boy who just had his upsharing, was nifter in his sleep. In the middle of the Shiva, 8 of his boys came to pay a Shiva call. These boys who are on the fringe of society, who most people wrote them off, but he reached out to them, he was makar of them, he kept up with them. And at the end of the Shiva call, these 8 boys, they stand up to leave. And they turn to Rabbi Weintraub and they tell him, we've been thinking about what you're going through right now. And as an acknowledgement of your pain and that how much we care, we're thinking, what could we do for you? What could we do to show you how much we care? So we decided, us 8, that this Shabbos, we're going to keep Shabbos completely. In your honor and as a schus for your son. And they left. After they left the house, there were other people who were sitting there by the Shiva. They turned to Rabbi Weintraub and they say, this is a cop-out. This is cheap. You who've given of yourself hours and hours, nights and days, you dropped anything for them. When everybody else wrote them off, you were there for them. And all they could give you is one Shabbos? That's all they could give you? They give you a year, 6 months. One Shabbos, that's it? They were clearly very disappointed. Rabbi Weintraub turns to them and says, how much money do you think I would give to have my little boy back with me for one more Shabbos, where I could take him with me to shul and he'll sit next to me? And then I'll hold his hand, we'll walk home, and I'll make Kiddush, and I'll bench him, and I'll tuck him into bed. And then the next morning, I'll take him back with me to shul, and we'll have a Suda together, and I'll read him a book, and I'll play with him. How much money do you think I would give to have one more Shabbos with my little boy? I would sell my house. I would give away everything I have. Hashem has one Shabbos with 8 of his children. Can you imagine what that's worth for him? To have one Shabbos together with 8 of his precious children who otherwise wouldn't have kept Shabbos. Now, Rabbi Weintraub was not in denial. And he knows that the boys the rest of the year weren't going to keep Shabbos. But he looked for the flecks of gold. He looked for the positivity. Because from there, we can build. From there, it is a reflection. It's a mirror of so much more good that hasn't yet come out, but under the proper conditions can come out. But the first thing we need to do is acknowledge it, identify it, and celebrate it, as opposed to what the other people were doing, which is minimizing it, maching it avek, delegitimizing it. You can always find a but. We can always find a reason why it's not perfect. So let's be practical. Let's be practical. How do we shift from a negative language to Meiser Vidui, where we can appreciate our goodness? So I would like to suggest 3 challenges. The first challenge, and they go in order of difficulty. The first challenge is when we become aware of that little voice in our heads yapping away in a negative way, tell that voice, I am not available to listen to you anymore. You've been talking for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, nonstop. You've had your say. I know your opinion. I know your perspective in life. Ad kan. I'm not available to listen to you. You could keep on talking, but I am not going to engage with you. I am not going to listen to you. And I'm not going to focus on you. It takes work and it takes practice. But the first thing is stop giving this voice so much attention. The second challenge is take out a pen and paper. I know this scares people right away, taking out a pen and paper. And write down all the things about yourself which are good, which are right, which is working, which is commendable, which other people find attractive. If you're not sure, what do people compliment you on? That might be an indication. Things that you've done, even if they're small things, and even if it's imperfect, write down on a piece of paper a list. And it doesn't matter if you can only come up with a few. Keep that list handy and keep on adding. And this is the last part, the last challenge, which is the hardest. And it may sound weird and it may sound funny. When no one's looking and no one's around, stand in front of a mirror. Stare at your face. Stare into your own eyes. And tell yourself that you are enough. That you are good. Be like the farmer in the times of the Beis HaMikdash. He had to verbalize it and articulate it out loud. You don't think Hashem knows that this farmer took the Meiser and the Meiser Sheni and the Truma? You don't think Hashem knows? Who was he telling this to? Perhaps he was telling it to himself. Because himself is who had to hear this message. Is it a weird thing to do? Yes. But you know what's more weird? To go through your whole life and the only thing you know about yourself are all the things you did wrong, because we have this voice that yaps away and saying, you're not this, you're not that, you're never going to amount to anything, you're a loser, you're this, you're that, you're a shmata, you're a mistake, you should never have been born. That's more weird than to stand in front of a mirror, look at yourself in the eye, and verbalize out loud all the beautiful things about you, no ifs, ands, or buts. And if it feels uncomfortable, that's a good sign. That means that you're learning a new language and it's uncomfortable because you don't know that language. There's a very good reason why this lesson is in this week's Parsha. because we're starting Slichas Motzei Shabbos, and we're going into the whole season of the Yom Neraim, Rosh Hashanah, Slichas, and Yom Kippur, where we say Vidui over and over and over again. And many times, that's all that people walk away with. All the things I haven't done right. So comes Parshas Ki Savo, this week's Parsha, before you begin. Before you begin all the Musar Shmuzin, before you begin all the Achetz, before you begin all the Vidois, before you begin all the moral inventories and all the self-reflection to grow, verbalize, internalize unequivocally, out loud, all the amazing golden flakes and golden nuggets that you have in you. And if we do this for ourselves, we'll start to do this for our children, and we'll start to do this for our families, of focusing on the positive. And that will radiate and have a ripple effect to the rest of the world. So will you be a fly, or will you be a bee?